Anyway, this is the Middle East. This is Europe, Middle East, Africa cover of Time Putin. This same edition, this is the Asian version.
Okay.
This is the South Pacific version.
Okay.
Wow.
Same issue. This is the American edition.
Where's Putin?
It's fluff.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. They will talk about things in their foreign edition they will not put in their American edition. And different covers.
Why is that? I mean, of course, it's an obvious answer, but
Yeah. The obvious answer is it's got CFR leadership at the top. And there's certain things they don't want the American people to know so they can make an informed decision and vote right.
And let's start. You can see I've been here speaking with Mr. Art Thompson. He is the CEO of the John Birch Society. And by the way, I'm Mike Chism, and this is Voices of the Republic. Sorry, we kind of started off a little different. That's a very good point. And for our viewers, what is CFR?
Okay, the CFR is the Council on Foreign Relations.
Correct.
Now, it is an organization that came out of the Royal Institutes on Foreign Affairs in England, but it had its own American identity. The individuals who started, the primary man was Colonel Edward Mendell House. And Colonel Edward Mendell House was President Wilson's alter ego. You rarely saw Wilson in his early years as president without House with him. And he wrote a book called Philip Drew Administrator, wherein he advocated a government based on Karl Marx.
Okay.
And that's what he wanted to instill in the United States. And that's why so many things happened in the Wilson years that were right out of the Communist Manifesto, the income tax, the Federal Reserve, that sort of thing.
1913, the Federal Reserve.
Yes. So all those things came about from this. Well, anyway, he was the primary mover in the foundation of the Council on Foreign Relations in the United States. Others who helped him were the Dulles brothers. Now, I'm talking about Allen and John Foster.
Okay, I've not heard of them. So.
Okay, John Foster Dulles was Eisenhower's Secretary of State. And Allen Dulles was the head of the CIA, the first head of the CIA. And the goal of the Council on Foreign Relations is a one world government with the economy managed by the government. In a word, socialism.
I'd like to get to that here shortly, but tell us a little about yourself. I believe you.
Myself?
I believe you got with the John Birch Society in 1964.
May of
You're
64.
from Seattle.
That's correct.
Tell our audience a little bit about yourself.
Well, I breathe.
It's getting a little hard to breathe with all the restrictions.
At my age, that's a benefit.
They might tax that, how much you breathe.
Yeah, that's true. No, seriously, I don't know what to say about myself. I hate talking about myself, to be honest with you. What you see is what you get. And I've had a lot of experience in various things that have been helpful over the years. I started as a young man reading a lot of books. My dad channeled my reading as a young man. He gave me the first edition of 1984 when I was 10 years old. And it's not a book to be read by a 10-year-old because of certain passages in it, but it set me up to realize that there were people in the world that wanted to rule the world and they wanted to split the world into three parts, you see. Each one appearing as though they were enemies, but at the pinnacle they were working together because perpetual war for perpetual peace was the slogan amongst themselves. In other words, if we can get people thinking that you're my enemy and we're going to have a war, then you don't notice what the dictator's doing to you at the top, and you'll do anything for the war effort. National security,
Military machine.
tax, yeah,
The
the whole
military
thing.
machine, yes.
So from there, I started to, and my dad set up my heroes. He would go to the library every 2 weeks. Here's 3 books I want you to read. So he gave me my heroes. And he made me read all the biographies of our founders, made me read and understand the Declaration and the Constitution before I was 11 or 12 years old. And so later on, I started to notice that, yes, we've got people like McCarthy and others out there who are trying to get rid of communism out of government. But they're under attack, and from what I can read about communism, what they're saying is true. Why is everybody, therefore, mad at people like that? So I started to read books about biographies of Herb Philbrick, who infiltrated.
I've heard of him, yes.
Yeah, infiltrated the Communist Party. Matt Svedek, who did so also. They made a movie about him too in Hollywood. It's a very striking story. Just one little snippet of it.
Do you know the name of for the audience, do the name of the movie?
No, I don't.
Okay.
But you can probably look Svedek up online and
Now, how is that spelled? Do you recall?
Cvetic, I think it is.
I don't mean to pick your brain, but a lot of people that'll be watching
Sure.
have no idea.
Of course. So what happened was he was not allowed by the FBI to tell anybody that he wasn't a conscientious communist except his priest. He couldn't tell his mother, couldn't tell his father, couldn't tell his siblings. So his mother and father died thinking that they had lost their son to communism. When they had a trial of these communists who had performed criminal acts, it wasn't because they were members of the Communist Party. They had actually engaged in criminal acts to promote communism in the United States.
Which is happening today in a way.
In a way.
But we'll get to that.
Yeah. But he was sitting at the defense table. So the prosecution called their first witness. And their first witness got up from the defense table and went to the witness chair and exposed the fact that he, for 9 years or more, had been a communist for the FBI, informing them as to what was
Deep cover.
Deep cover.
Yes.
And he had gotten, his brother beat him up even in the past because he thought his brother was a traitor, and his brother served in the Navy and things like that. So it was quite an emotional thing.
He was a very patriotic person.
Very patriotic guy.
I mean, he
Anyway.
sacrificed a lot.
So I thought, that's how you do this. So I started to infiltrate Marxist organizations, and I worked in tandem with individuals on the Seattle Police Intelligence Squad. I mean, I would inform them, of what I was getting and that sort of thing, and we worked together on some
Were you ever in
projects.
fear of your life?
Only once.
Only once.
And that's what made me stop doing it, because I had a wife and 2 girls at home. I got up and gave a speech at the memorial meeting for Malcolm X, and somebody in the audience knew I was a phony.
Well, that's a great place to have it happen.
So
Wow.
I stopped doing what I was doing, okay? But in the process, I learned a great deal of how they work, what their tactics are, and how they hide what they do from the general public, and so on and so forth.
Rules for Radicals.
Rules for Radicals.
Yes,
But I was
excellent
seeing them
book.
close up and personal. So anyway, from there, I at the same time, I became involved with the John Birch Society. I'd been looking for 2 years for some way of getting involved. I wanted to find the best way, the most effective, efficient way to be involved. And I came to the conclusion it was the John Birch Society, but I couldn't find them. And that was in 1962. It took me another year to find them. I was actually going to some of their talks. American Opinion Speakers Bureau, it said. I didn't know that the American Opinion had anything to do with the John Birch Society. So finally, this guy doorbelled my house. And he was working for Goldwater, the draft
Barry
Goldwater.
Goldwater,
Yeah.
yes.
So we chummed up, and I started working with him, helping him in that thing, and finally he gave me a book. And I started to read the book. And he came over to the house to see how I was enjoying the book. As a matter of fact, I was sitting on the couch with my fingers in the book, one finger reading the text and the other finger reading the notes, And he says, have you started reading the book? And I says, well, here, what do you think? And I says, I have one question. I says, are you a member of the John Birch Society? And his answer was, what do you want to know for? Because in those years, we were the
Clandestine,
society,
wasn't it?
well, it wasn't as much clandestine as a lot of our members allowed the public mass media attack against the John
scrutiny.
Birch Society to rub off on where they were afraid to always say right out front they were members. And it was something we finally got them to stop doing for the most part. Be out front. Don't try and hide anything. We're truth, honor, and the American way. You don't have to hide what you're doing. And so, but the smear in Seattle at that time was intense. And the reason it was intense was the Boeing company was an anti-communist corporation. They made it required viewing to go down to the company theaters, company by company, unit by unit, and sit down and watch a video, not a video, but film strip called Communism on the Map, which was the first half of the Blue Book, the founding document of the John Birch Society.
That's interesting.
It is.
Very interesting.
So that, I mean, the press, it was awful. Boeing is doing this, and they're forcing their political stance on their employees. And well, they didn't even stop there. Boeing says, okay, now that we've got all of our employees seeing it, we are going to give you chits that you can give to your closest relatives. And it was only closest, your spouse, your in-laws, or whatever. They can come on company property, which was highly secured, and go to our theaters and watch it too. So I think about 250,000 people watch that as a result of Boeing's policy. But in the process, Boeing had a big shakeup. They started to get pressure from the federal government because of R&D and other contracts they had, military contracts, to where they were forced to kick a couple of people off the board, and they put in a Council on Foreign Relations member as the new CEO. And from that day forward, Boeing has been globalist.
And in a way, nothing's changed.
No.
It hasn't. I mean, look at how intense the government attacks those that do not wish to comply with the present administration rules and regulations, of which we all know are just taking away our freedoms each and every day.
An example is in the hypocrisy. You can use 501c3 tax money to support a government program. You cannot use 501c3 tax money to oppose it.
Interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
And isn't the churches also have specific guidelines? If they're 501c3, they cannot speak any political or...
Well, that's supposedly, that's true, but there is a growing movement of pastors, and I don't know if you're aware of
The
this.
Black Robe Brigade?
Not necessarily the Black Robe Brigade, although they're growing too, and they're interlocking with what I'm going to tell you now. But there have been a group of pastors that went to Washington, D.C., and just stood in front of the Capitol and said, we are going to preach politics from the pulpit. Come and get us, because we're going to stand together and sue you if you try. And nothing happened. So they've got to realize that if everybody does it, it's no longer against the law.
Correct.
And our forefathers, the founders of this country,
Lots of them were preachers that stood.
that's correct.
Right.
But what they knew was that the government cannot be allowed to tax the individual. So they wrote the Constitution so that the federal government could not do that. Well, eventually, long story short, the American people were finally convinced that they needed two things to help finance the government. And change the whole financial underpinning of the federal government from what it was to something new through the Federal Reserve and the income tax and the direct election of senators. Those three things are interlocked in their application. Maybe I better explain why.
Sure, for the audience, you bet.
So the way the federal government was originally taxed or financed was through excise and tariffs.
Correct.
Okay. Now, if they went over budget, if they needed more money, what they would do is send a bill to the state governments. Say, legislature, you owe us so much, apportion it to the population in your state. In other words, New York got a bigger bill than Kentucky because of the population difference. So this meant that the senators that were appointed by these legislatures had a check and balance on that budget. In other words, if the House wanted to aggrandize themselves or build a bridge to nowhere in their district, the Senate would say, no. My legislature has to pay for your bridge. We're not going to vote for it because if I vote for it, my legislature will take me out.
And that's checks and balances in a way.
That's
and
checks
the House holds the purse.
Yeah.
Correct.
So they couldn't get their pork barrel, and government bloated because of that system, so they had to change it. So how are we going to finance it then? We want to take the senators out so they're no longer beholden to the legislatures. And then we're going to have the Federal Reserve, and so we're going to have to have an income tax, but we can't tax people directly because the Constitution says you can't.
Well, they say they can today.
Well, yeah, because they had an amendment.
Correct.
And in that income tax amendment, it overturned the section of the Constitution that forbade it. So now we see what we have because the federal government knew that if our founders knew if the federal government could directly tax the individual and company, it could control the individual and company and pulpit or whatever it is.
Let's move forward a little.
Okay.
Because I know you're here in Spokane, that you're having a speaking engagement.
Yes.
And you'll be talking about what's really happening today and
Yes.
how important it is for the American people out there, for you all to really understand we are in a lot of deep kimchi, as I'd say, from Hawaii. Because I'm from Hawaii.
Well, I thought that was Korean.
Yeah, it is, but I spent several months in South Korea. And I remember coming at Kimpo, getting off the airplane, and immediately smelling the kimchi. It was just unbelievable. Anyways, sorry I got off plane.
They're going to spoil the guy's dinner, you know.
So let me ask you, sir, what is the most pressing issue you would say right now that the American people need to wake up about?
Well, there are three things. Well, actually, more than three. But three things that are of paramount interest right now that if they go through will be a serious problem. We could talk about property rights, but that's been a problem for some time. It will continue to be a problem. We need to stop it, but hey, if we lose one here, we can still win there. The other is a Common Core, for instance. Now, I don't want to get off on Common Core right at this moment, but we have been heavily involved in that, and the influence that we put out there in Common Core.
On a quick note, would you agree that Common Core is part of the communist agenda? By training our children in a way that is un-American, let's just say.
Yeah, you can say that. It's a little more complicated than that, but basically you can boil it down to that, yes.
I didn't mean to get you off track.
No, that's okay. But if we lose the Common Core fight, we can still survive as a country, and we can come back and work to get rid of it in the future. Because it takes a while for that to come in and completely destroy the students. It's going to take a few years.
So this is one of a myriad of other issues.
Yes.
But I'd like to know what you think is...
Well, I'm getting there.
I know.
The next one I want to talk about is the Constitutional Convention. Now, we're putting out this issue of our magazine, a very comprehensive article, to show that the left has been behind this move all along, and a lot of good conservatives have been pulled into it.
Hogwashed.
Yeah, and let me give you an example. One name, and your viewers or listeners or whatever can look this up online. Look up Lawrence Lessig, Lessig. Lawrence Lessig attended the Bilderberg meeting last year. That's how important he is, okay? He is the man behind all the coalition for a CONCON. And the conservatives are up front for the conservatives, and the leftists are up front for the leftists. And they each have a different front agenda to get the leftists and the conservatives behind this move. Some of them we think are honest, some of them we think are dishonest. But I don't want to go there, if you don't mind. Because some of these are conservative heroes, and I want people to look at the facts and then decide on their own. But look up Lawrence Lessig. You'll find that he is the head of Call a Convention Coalition, into which many of these conservative organizations have been pulled into. Lawrence Lessig, besides being a Bilderberger, has written and spoken to the fact that we need to rewrite the entire Constitution of the United States. He has pulled in other leftists who agree. The Stevens, the former Justice Stevens, has a new book that talks about these things. At any rate, Lawrence Lessig, over the years, in order to try and build this coalition amongst the leftist students on campus, has shown a video of Jesus Christ lip-syncing some pop song. I can't remember the title of it. Then taking off all his clothes down to a diaper, running down the city street to get run over by a city bus. This is the kind of fellow that we're dealing with. And he is on the board of some of these conservative organizations and the head of leftist organizations and a coalition run by him of both. At any rate, I
wonder how they feel if they did it to Muhammad.
Well, I don't think they have any feeling left. If you understand.
Yes, I do.
Yes. But at any rate, we are a very forgiving people as Christians.
Yes, we are.
Muslims tend not to be.
Off with your head.
Yeah. So at any rate, the pressing issue why I'm in town is free trade. To get people to understand that it isn't free and it isn't trade. That it is nation building on an international scale. Your free trade treaties are 20% trade and 80% nation building and changing society, changing banking rules, changing this, changing that, forming tribunals, forming courts, and that sort of business.
I have that in my notes about tribunals. When I read that, and I said tribunals, it reminded me of the military. Could you elaborate a little bit about those tribunals?
For instance, NAFTA. NAFTA was 2,000 pages, right? Nobody read those 2,000 pages before they voted on it.
Obamacare is
Another example. Yes. And that was 2,500, as I recall. It boiled down to, I think, 900 in its final form at 10-point type.
Wasn't it Nancy Pelosi that said we need to pass it so that we can read it?
Well,
how asinine is that? I mean, really, guys, please.
Well, they did the same with NAFTA. They didn't know what was in it until after they passed it, and lo and behold, here's this NAFTA court that supersedes all state Supreme Courts and supersedes the federal court.
But not the Constitution.
Not legally, but in practice.
Okay.
Now, we can get to that. But at any rate, one of the edicts that they passed at this NAFTA court was that we would not be able to curtail the use of Mexican trucks crossing the Mexican border and competing with American truckers and trucking companies. Now, that's just one of the things that they had a decision on. Now, they haven't implemented it because it's not politically smart to do so right now, but it's still their decision.
And wasn't it because of the John Birch Society, one of the major leads that stopped it?
We were very heavily involved in that, yes. But at any rate, one of the things that we do when people sign up at jbs.org is they can sign up for weekly alerts. What's the issue right now? What do we have to get our emails and letters and phone calls into Congress on right now? Or maybe even our city councilman. It all depends on the issue. We go, by the way, on trying to inform opinion molders. You never see a communist at your door saying, I want you to become a good communist and read this stuff. It doesn't happen. But we think that that's the only way that we can go about our business. Well, let's take a lesson from these people. And why don't we go where they go, to the members of the city council and the county commission and the congressman and the head of the Kiwanis and so on and so forth, and inform them in an outreach program, in a friendly atmosphere. Take them out to lunch. Not this, not confrontational. Never go to a hearing and expect to make change. Those hearings are show business. They're already pre-programmed.
I agree.
In fact, when we fought sex education in the schools back in the 60s and 70s, we showed people the perverts and communists in the organizations putting sex ed in the schools, and the perversion, not teaching eggs and other things and male and female and hygiene.
Basic sexual,
Hey, I can teach a moron
That's true.
in 30 minutes what he needs to know. Okay? And they wanted a K through 12 program. Anyway, not going there.
Well, speaking of that, if you don't mind, look at what happened to that one parent, and I can't believe, I don't remember what state it was, where he was standing up that his daughter. New Hampshire, and he got arrested. Just
the interesting
points to
thing about
ponder.
that? You know the interesting thing about that? He was a radio talk show host in New Jersey.
I didn't know that.
Who left New Jersey to get away from the mess in New Jersey.
From the fire to the frying pan.
He goes to New Hampshire, and it's the same thing here. You can't run away from it. There's only two places on the earth that I know of where you can get away from it, and you don't want to go there. And that's the interior of Borneo or the interior of New Guinea. But hey, I don't want to go there.
Neither do I. But what saddened me when I saw that video, what really saddened me is, why didn't the people there stand up and tell that officer, or back that man up, say, wait a minute, this is not right.
They're afraid.
Yes, and the fear is part of their control.
And that's part of the thing of why they smeared the John Birch Society, to make us fearful to stand up and be counted. It was to try and keep people who already were Birchers from being more open, and those who wanted to be Birchers from becoming Birchers, because they didn't want to get involved in all this controversy, you see. They couldn't stand the heat in the kitchen, as Truman said. And so that's one of the things that they use. It is a tactic they've used in this country that I know of and can document since 1789-90, that they've used it against good, sound, constitutional Christians. And I don't want to go there because that's 600 pages of history that I'm in the middle of writing right now, but enough said. At any rate, I lost my train of where I was going on.
We were talking about,
free trade, but at any rate, so that's the court situation. They have these decisions. Some of them they haven't implemented yet because the people aren't ready to accept them. When enough people get riled up, things happen against their program, and so it's a salami slice thing. A little bit, a little bit, a little bit.
Like the boiling frog.
Like the boiling frog, but
Correct.
Sometimes, and I think this is what's going to happen with Common Core, is that they will make a big leap, 2 steps forward, and have all this controversies and compromise. Okay, we'll step back, but they only step back 1 step, not the 2. And so incrementally, they continue to do this sort of thing. And this is the problem with the Republicans and the Democrats. The Democrats play a 2-step. The Republicans play a 1-step, and they come off looking moderate. They become reasonable because they are the people in there between the citizen and the socialist saying, we can live with a little reform, we can live with a little this and a little of that, like Obamacare. That's what they're playing now. The leadership of the Republican Party is no more interested in repealing Obamacare than the man in the moon. Now, I get on the Hill about once a quarter, and I do a couple of things while I'm there, besides, picking their brains on some things. There's a lot of things that go on behind the scenes you never hear about. I'm usually there to give certificates of appreciation to some congressmen and senators who vote 100% on the Constitution, on 10 things we look at in our magazine.
If I may inquire about that list,
Yeah.
do you have a list on your site
Oh, yeah.
where people can go, where
Absolutely.
you all can go to and see who are not just saying something, but actually walking the
Yeah,
walk?
you can go to jbs.org, and there it will say voting record or something like that, and click on there. It will give you the voting record for years on the congressmen and senators and give you the bills so you can actually see what they stand for and whether this was a good or a bad vote. So if they vote 100% on that, I give them a certificate. And let's see, and the other thing is I take them research papers for something that I know is coming up in the future. Now, I can't be there to lobby. We're not recorded, we're not registered lobbyists and that sort of thing. So I will give them information that they can use to get them imbued with this information so they will be able to support or oppose whatever it is in the future, you see. So that's, then like I say, I pick their brains. For instance, you talk about the Federal Reserve. One of the congressmen was telling me, we're trying to find out how the Federal Reserve is bailing out Europe. We know they're doing it, but they're so secretive, we can't get in and find out specifically. But he says, this is what we think they're doing. He says, they're having currency exchanges. You give us X billion dollars worth of euros and we'll give you the X billion dollars. And you have our currency and we have your currency. You don't need a law, you don't need anybody overseeing it, you just do it that way. Except the euros go in the basement of the Federal Reserve and they don't get spent. They just sit there, just paper in the corner. But they spend our billions.
It's actually just digits now, is it not?
Well, there's that. Yeah, that's true too. But although, during the Iraq and the Afghan war, believe me, there were a lot of pallets of $100 bills sent into those countries.
Right, given to, yes, we know.
Some of them were taken off the plane and put on another plane and flown out of those countries to parts unknown. So
Wasn't
But that
there
sort of thing goes on.
billions missing? Billions.
Oh, yeah.
Billions.
A lot. And, but it even gets worse than that. I mean, let me give you an example of free trade, just, you know, because we're kind of on that subject. I have here the annual report of the Export-Import Bank for 2013. Now, if you go through here, all of a sudden you start noticing something very interesting, because we're giving low-cost loans. This is what this is all about. This was started by FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, so that American industry could go and sell American goods overseas, with those individuals being able to purchase it because it was almost no-cost loans, close to it.
Okay.
So places that are all part of the old Soviet Union and China and on and on and on. But when you get in here, you start noticing something very interesting, because you start to see Boeing.
That's very interesting.
This is just the first page.
My goodness, that is
And you just keep going, and
very
it's
revealing.
Boeing.
Very revealing.
Yeah. Boing.
Boy! And that's how the ball bounces.
Yeah. So anyway, it's gotten the nickname now of Boeing's Bank. This is how it works. You've got a country or a foreign airline can't afford to buy Boeing airplanes because it's not subsidized like Eurobus is, okay? So in order to compete, they go through the Export-Import Bank. The only problem with that is, in so doing, they actually set up an unfair business practice against American airlines, who have to go out and get loans the normal way. So they have to buy the planes at a higher price for the net cost than the foreign airlines and countries. But it even gets more interesting. For instance, we'll sell them to Pakistan. And because Pakistan is helping us so much in the war on terror, we want to be nice guys and forgive them their
For
loans.
the loans. I wish they'd forgive some of my loans.
Yeah. So in essence, what happens is they get them for free. Now, courtesy of you and me, our tax money.
Tax dollars, yeah.
Yeah. So those are some of the things that, when I say that it's not free trade, actually it is free trade, but they get it free.
And we get the bill.
Yeah, yeah. So those sorts of things go on behind the scenes, but that's the least onerous. That's the least dangerous to American society in business and the Constitution. It's the other things in those 2,000 to 4,000 to 6,000 pages that they're coming up with these treaties in the Pacific and in the Atlantic. We have organizations in the United States that have been trying to get the United States to merge with the European Union for years. They include such things as the United Nations Association, the Trilateral Commission, the Council on Foreign Relations, the Atlantic Council, the Transatlantic Policy Network. Now, to give you an idea, the Atlantic Council is an organization that wants us to merge with the European Union. We will become part of that one nation. The chairman of the Atlantic Union, when he was a Republican U.S. Senator, was a chairman of that organization the day that Obama made him Secretary of Defense, Charles Hagel. Now the man in charge of the Defense Department is a man that wants to give away the country. And he's a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. Another one. We have the Transatlantic Policy Network. And if you look at that, there is a congressional working committee working with them. Their goal, you can't find it real easily. You got to really dig into their website to find this information. But their goal is to merge the United States with the EU by 2015.
That's next year.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to make it. But that's the goal through such things as this treaty that they're negotiating.
I hope they never make it.
Oh, you and me both. But
And it takes, I'm sorry to say, but it takes individuals like yourself, organizations like yours, many other organizations, to bring the awareness to the American people.
That's right. Anyway, one of the guys working on this thing is John Boehner, Speaker of the House.
The Speaker of the House.
Another Republican. Now, if you go to Wikipedia or other sites concerning John Boehner, he will tell you that his most proud moment is when he was able to work with Teddy Kennedy to get No Child Left Behind through the Congress.
Is that Mr. Chapelwittick?
Yeah, that's the guy.
I just threw that out there.
Yes. And that's, George Bush literally got him to write it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And then he wrote most of it. Boehner was part of the process, and then they both worked together to get it through Congress, which nobody likes. Teachers don't like No Child Left Behind. Students, I mean, you know, it's just a mess. So we got a better program for you. It's called Common Core. And so when you don't like that, they'll have another better program for you.
They'll just keep on throwing it at us.
Well, when I give talks on Common Core, what I like to do is to let people know that this is just another rung on the ladder towards international socialism. Because a lot of people, well, they deny this as a national program, state programs. Well, I say, no, it is not even a national program. It's an international program.
Yes.
If you go to the NEA, even though now they're starting to have second thoughts about Common Core because they're even losing their membership over this. A lot of teachers are seeing through this. And so they are now hinting that they're going to be against Common Core. We've already got the New York and Chicago Teachers Union coming out publicly against it. They have their own reasons, but at any rate. So it's catching on. A lot of people are beginning to realize this is a serious problem. But when you go to these sites, you discover that they want internationalism. The NEA, the American Federation of Teachers, the Education International, and I'll talk about that in a moment. They all want an international curricula. If you go to, I think it's commoncore.com, I think that's it. It's something like that. It is an organization promoting Common Core, and they have a video on there. It's a black and white drawing thing. And they let you know that the goal really is not to have Common Core in the United States. The goal is to have Common Core throughout the world.
Is that like a New World Order?
Kind of like that. And so that right in the video, they say, we want a student in Shanghai and a student in Seattle and a student in
Moscow,
wherever, to be all going up the steps of education at the same place, at the same time, with the same curriculum, all around the world.
From different societies.
From different societies and with different systems of law. Where's the Constitution in all of this?
Yes.
And the Constitution has not been taught well in the schools for, well, when I went to school, it was not taught well. It was taught somewhat. But today, it is not taught hardly at all. I can show that even in schools in Idaho in the 1970s, we're not teaching the Bill of Rights as written in the Constitution. For instance, I was in Coeur d'Alene plus or minus 71. And I had a parent show me their son's textbook. And in there, as if it was the actual Bill of Rights, they had the Bill of Rights, the 10 bills, the amendments.
Correct.
And the Second Amendment particularly stood out because it said the people have the right to own firearms, but Congress has the right to regulate them.
And that is definitely the wrong wording.
It's definitely the wrong word. And you see today in Common Core histories and that sort of thing that have been approved by Common Core, that same language or something to the effect of the people have the right to keep and bear arms in a militia.
And it changes the perception.
The whole thing's different.
Yes.
Since the militia no longer exists, that means nobody can. And that's, by the way, one of the things that Justice Stevens has in his new book, and I can't remember the title of it right offhand, but he suggests that we add language to the Second Amendment. And the words he wants added are in a militia.
That's not in the Constitution.
No. So you have the right to keep and bear arms in a militia. And so that changes the whole idea of the Bill of Rights. There is a big movement right now, and he is included in that, to eliminate the death penalty in the United States. That's part of the CON-CON movement right now on the left side of the ledger.
Which the CON-CON is one of the worst things right now.
It is. It's an Article 5. You can't say you're against the Constitution because that's what the Constitution says.
Correct.
But in this day and age,
yes.
it is highly dangerous to do it.
I wanted to go back a little bit about me. Sorry, guys. You know, I was very privileged. I went to a Catholic school. I had the Dominican nuns and the Filipinos. I grew up on the island of Kauai. And,
You have scars on your hands?
actually, yeah, from all those. And
Wow.
they had corporal punishment, and I think I turned out okay.
Well, when I went to
But the-
school,
I'm
it
sorry.
took sergeant punishment for me.
Yeah, I guess we understand.
Yeah. I was a rebel.
So was I. I was a. Anyways, the nuns probably got the most workout with me. But what they did, what I was really privileged with, they did teach the Constitution.
Mm-hmm.
And I learned it from a very young age. And then anyways, I just wanted to tell you all that. And a lot of the schools, as you indicated, do not anymore.
No.
And if they do, it's
So
perceived
superficial.
differently. Correct. We're almost out of time. And you've got a million things I'd like to talk to you about. Like Obamacare. I heard
Yes.
South Carolina supposedly the House just passed a bill saying no Obamacare. And what was the other state? South Carolina, I believe, was another one.
I don't remember right now. I do know that's
I think
true.
Georgia, just a couple of days ago, and then South Carolina. I have to look it up, but you all can look it up on the internet out there.
See, the problem with Obamacare, there's two things that most people are not aware of. When Obamacare was passed, they made a 10-year appropriation bill, not a 1-year appropriation bill like they normally do. So they funded Obamacare for 10 years, and it's in the act. So you can't go back and undo that without repealing the whole law called Obamacare. The other thing is this. There's been a move for a long time, and free trade's part of it, is to merge us with other nations. And you're probably familiar with something that was nicknamed the North American Union, the Security and Prosperity Partnership. Well, one of the things that they wanted to do immediately was to start merging healthcare. Well, you can't merge free enterprise with socialism. So you've got to socialize our healthcare in order to comfortably merge us with the socialist healthcare. And that's part of Obamacare that nobody talks about. This is an international agenda as well as a national one. That the national one's obvious and bad enough, but it's being done to comfortably merge us with these other socialist states. They want to merge our police, they want to merge our army. I've got things in here. Obama just had a meeting with the military leaders from Mexico, Canada, the United States. They're moving that agenda forward. They're now allowing, in the name of a national emergency, for Mexican and Canadian troops to come into the United States if needed. Will that happen? Not if we have anything to say about it, but it's now an agreement. Hasn't passed Congress or anything else. It's just a gentleman's agreement. You know,
I don't consider them gentlemen who's against our republic.
I know, with a phone call and a pen.
Yeah.
But
And they're also using Obamacare. I've had a lot of veterans contact me, and they're using Obamacare now. Where if you go in and you have you say I can't sleep, or a number of reasons now, and this is even happening supposedly in the VA, that the physician will write something, and that you can actually lose your right to own and carry a firearm.
Probably it's
Which is just another, in my opinion, another tactic to continually to control us. And
Well,
once we lose our firearms,
Yeah.
I have to tell you, Mr. Thompson, once we lose our firearms,
it'll be
because who was
very
it?
much of a
Was
problem.
it Jefferson that said that the teeth of the Constitution is with the Second Amendment?
I don't remember exactly. I've concentrated on other things lately.
Don't get me wrong. I'm not
Sure.
I abhor violence. I've seen enough of it in my lifetime.
Yeah, but it's one of the reasons that, well, even Yamamoto tried to tell the Japanese,
Sleeping, yeah.
you can't invade that country. You know, we've got an army, an instant army of over 10 million people. You know what they call them? People who buy hunters' licenses.
That's correct.
That isn't including all those people that don't. And that is quite a force. The partisans gave the Nazis a real hard time behind the lines, but it was nothing.
It was a very small number of people.
Very
Yes.
small number.
Yes.
Because they didn't have very many weapons. But we do.
And the weapons they did have, I've done a lot of research on that, as a matter of fact. I'm glad you brought it up. The weapons they did have was really substandard to what the Germans had. However, what we have almost equals to what our military has.
And we have very ingenious people.
Yes, we do.
And we can, you know, even on the battlefront in World War II, we found men that were able to innovate. For instance, going through hedge groves with the tanks. That simple little fork in the front of our tanks. We couldn't maneuver until they did that. And they came up with that idea and started revising our tanks within a 12-hour period of time. We have people that think for themselves, that can
Very
innovate.
innovative, very
Yes.
innovative, yes.
And you can do all sorts of things with the material and the machinery and everything else we have in this country to oppose any kind of invader. But our problem is we don't have an invader.
It's the internal.
It's the internal.
Yes.
Lincoln said something back in 1838. And he said basically this, that there isn't any army led by a Bonaparte, Napoleon, that can drink a cup of water from the Ohio or have a footprint on the Blue Ridge. He says, if we are ever taken over, it'll be from within. And he was very smart in that.
And that's the communist agenda too.
That's it.
We got a couple minutes left.
Okay.
And anything you'd like to close with? And we could speak for hours.
We could.
Yes, we
Well,
could.
let me say this, and not leave on a negative, but a positive. And that is that we're having tremendous influence out there. The first step is education, and this final solution is an informed electorate. The American people will make the right decision if they have enough information, correct truth, that sort of thing.
Yes.
And that's what we base everything on. We try to go out to the opinion molders first as a focus with outreach. We don't hold rallies, we don't do demonstrations. That's a waste of time and money. Let me give you an example. I called on a guy, he says, man, we went out and there was 100 of us in front of City Hall and we prevented the mayor from running up the UN flag on UN Day. And I said, well, that's nice. You were there all day? Yep. Did the press come? And he said, nope. I said, if they had come, would you have gotten positive press? He said, probably not. I says, let me tell you how the Birch Society does it. We get together, 100 of us all collect enough pamphlets on the UN, and we go out 2 by 2, and we go out for all day long, the same amount of time you were in front of that place, and we doorbell hundreds of homes. The mayor comes and he runs up the UN flag, and everybody gets mad at him. Next year, he never does it again. That's how you do it. And by the way, this particular town, if 100 people, 50 teams of 2, had gone out and done that, they would have hit every home in that community in that 8 hours. It was about 10,000 homes.
And sometimes it's a lot better when we have a personal one-on-one relationship.
Exactly.
Instead of, and yeah, this is a good venue to the internet. The internet has become something that the present administration really is trying to control, because this is one of the ways we can get the word out.
You got to meet your neighbors. You got to work with your neighbors.
Yes.
They're the people you're going to have to trust in the long run. And so we know that when we get enough people doing these things on an organized, concerted action basis, things start to change in those communities. We already have communities all over this country where we've changed considerably. We have really changed them. And so that's the whole thing that we do. We inform, then involve, and then organize. And we keep going through that same process, getting bigger and bigger and bigger. This year we may be on this issue, and the next year we may be on another one, but we do have those that are almost permanent because the other side has a permanent agenda. So we have to work against those things like the United Nations and the idea of nationalizing our police and that sort of thing.
And I'm gonna have to close here, but that is another topic I would love to talk about, how the police force, and I'm an ex-cop, how the police, and I remember taking all kind of flack, and they've really moved more towards a militaristic type attitude. Instead of save and protect, then it's now, if you even look at me wrong, I'll taser you. And that's not for all the police. I'm not trying to jump on that, but it is their mindset and the people they're hiring. And I've got this from ex-friends that have been in the police force for many years, saying that the new people that they're recruiting in is a whole different world.
Well, it's a whole different world simply because they're coming out of the schools that have progressed down the wrong
Correct.
path. But I can tell you there's a concerted, and you probably know this, a concerted program to federalize our police departments. Correct. And it includes tax-deductible foundations, but it's mostly within the training that they're getting through the federal government one way or another. They're trying to alienate the police from the very people that are their strongest supporters. The veterans, the pro-life people, the conservative constitutionalists, and yet they're taught they're their problem. They are the real domestic terrorists.
Well, Mr. Thompson, I thank you for your
Oh,
time.
my
It was an
pleasure,
honor and a
believe me.
privilege, and I
Okay.
hope we can do this again.
Okay, look forward to it.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Thank you for watching. May God bless you, and as I always say, for our republic.